Bloomberg Businessweek is out with its new issue, and it looks at the role of cryptocurrency in ransomware attacks. With Bloomberg breaking the news that Colonial paid $5 million to hackers to get the pipeline back up and running, something President Biden just refused to comment on, I must say. We welcome now the man who served under President Trump as his Secretary of Energy. He's Dan Brouillette. So welcome. It's great to have you here, Dan. Thank you for coming back. Give us your take on this pipeline and the issue with our infrastructure.
Thanks, David. It's great to be back with you. I think if the story's correct and in fact a ransom was paid, it'll be very unfortunate. I hope that the company wasn't advised to do that. I suspect that they weren't. But what it does is it incentivizes other actors to do similar events around the country, and that's going to be something the American people are going to pay for dearly.
So what can we do to harden our infrastructure? We just heard President Biden talk about that. We need to do it. You've been in the job. What, as a practical matter, can we do? And is it private, or is it public, or a public partnership?
Well, it's a little bit of both. You know, the government doesn't own, as the president mentioned, the government doesn't own many of the networks. The pipeline is private in this case. Most of the pipelines in America are indeed owned by private corporations. Much of the electricity grid is the same. So the government doesn't really build out. So hardening is not really a function for the government. What the government can do a better job of is sharing the intelligence that we have with the private industry so that they understand what the threat is and can build out their networks to address it. That's something the government can do a better job of. The other thing the government could do a better job of is to look at these rate filings and understand that when a company asks for additional rate or additional resources for cyber improvements, that they approve them and that they grant them. The third thing the government can do is begin the process of reforming the permitting process throughout America and allow more infrastructure to be built. Redundancy and defense in depth is really the ultimate answer here.
Well, Dan, maybe this is a redundancy issue, but it strikes me that we talk about hardening the infrastructure. We've seen something like 400 attacks on infrastructure in 2019 alone in this country. Is part of the answer to decentralize? That is to say, we can't protect against all attacks, but maybe we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket, whether that's electricity, the electric grid, or whatever.
Well, that's true, David. I mean, when you think about this one incident, 45% of the refined product moving to the Northeast comes on one pipeline. The obvious question that should be raised is, why do we only have one pipeline? Why is there only one pipeline carrying this much fuel to one of the most populated areas in the country today? And I think the answer is very simple. It is very difficult to get permitting, to get approval for the development of new pipeline infrastructure, or in the case of electricity, new transmission needs or new transmission facilities throughout the country. So that's what the government role should be. It should be to look at the permitting process to ensure that it is certain, and importantly, David, that it is timely. That's one of the key issues here, is that governments take too long in many cases to actually approve the permit.
Dan, when it comes to the electric grid, we've heard a lot about, and there have been quite a few attacks on the electric grid. Is sort of microgrids part of the answer, and is that possible? Is that a permitting problem?
I think in some cases it may be a permitting problem. It is a good answer, David, to what we see today. When you can distribute the network, distribute the generation, distribute the network across the country, you're obviously creating more targets potentially. But if one target is taken down, as I mentioned earlier, you have defense in depth. You have other targets. You have other ways to provide that power, to provide that fuel in certain cases to consumers. It's very, very important that we continue this progress along those lines.
I just want to come back to one. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I'll add one last thing that I think the government can do it plays an important role here, and that's in the development of newer technology. So at the Department of Energy, we have 17 national laboratories. Many of them are working on quantum technologies. In fact, in Chicago, at the University of Chicago Argonne National Laboratory, we created a quantum internet, and that technology antiquates cybersecurity as we know it today. It alleviates the need or mitigates the need for encryption, for instance. That's another good answer, and that's a good role for the government to play, funding that technology.